All right, what's going on, guys? Simple Sports back. Another episode. Been a while, obviously. So let me give you a quick breakdown. So those of you who don't know me personally, my grandmother passed away last week. So we've been dealing with that for really the last month and a half or so. So I've been extremely busy, in and out of town and traveling and all this other stuff. But it's all squared away now. She's gone on. Got all that handled last week. Should be back to a more normal schedule for me personally now that that's all squared away. Sad times, obviously, but just if anyone was wondering, what was going on, that's sort of what's been happening. But I am now back, and want to talk about the Super Bowl. Super Bowl week. Super Bowl is on Sunday. The Pats and the Eagles, and I want to give my thoughts on the game overall because I'm not going to record that much this week. This is still a little bit of a busy week trying to catch up with work and things like that. So I wanted to get this out of the way now. So yeah, let's get right into it. So I want to talk about a few things first before I get to what I think the keys for each team are to winning, and then my predictions and a couple other things along the way. So heading into Sunday, the Pats are favored by, I think, 5 points or 4.5 points. 5.5, something like that. I know it's not that big of a spread. I think it started at like 9.5 or 7.5, something in that neighborhood. So they're favored by 4.5, which is to be expected. I don't, and I'll get into it, but I don't think they're going to have much issue with the Eagles. But Nick Foles played great last week, albeit against the Vikings. I wasn't sold on the Vikings all year. I know they made it pretty far. I thought the Saints were the better team, as a lot of people did. Unfortunately, the win-loss column didn't reflect that due to the miracle play, which, they don't get to swap them out just because of that. That's just the way it happened, and it is what it is. But I do think the Saints were the better team. I don't think the Vikings were as good as a lot of people made them out to be. Now, their defense is great, obviously, but I don't think it was as good as others made it. And it could be a combination of that and how good the Eagles are. Now, I've said all year that I thought the Eagles were the best team, so it's not straying away too far. I did think towards the end of the year, however, the Saints would actually go to the Super Bowl, but nevertheless, the Eagles are in it versus the Pats. Nick Foles had a great game last week, 352 yards, 3 touchdowns up against the Vikings. Pretty solid game from him. And then the Pats obviously had the 10-point comeback against the Jaguars in the AFC Championship game. And here's what I think the number one key is for the Pats. Okay, so let's get into the keys for each team. Number one for the Pats, they cannot afford to do what they've done in last year's Super Bowl, this year's AFC Championship game, even against the Seahawks a couple of Super Bowls ago. They can't fall behind to this team, especially not by 25. I think if they get down by 2 touchdowns early, heading into the fourth quarter at least, I don't think they're winning this game. I don't think the Eagles are bad enough to screw this one up. I think their coaching is too good, and I think they play the right type of football, which is running the football and playing defense, and they got 2 bruising running backs in Ajayi and Blunt. Ajayi a little more elusive than Blunt is, but nevertheless, both of them are pretty physical runners. And I don't think the Pats could recover if the Eagles got out to a 10, 14-point lead heading into the fourth quarter. It's just so many things will have to go right, like they did last year, but I don't think they will get the assistance from the Eagles that they got from the Falcons or even the Jaguars. I think the Eagles are a little more disciplined, a little more well-rounded altogether. I don't think that happens if that's the case. I don't think that will happen as far as the Pats falling down early, big, maybe a touchdown at the most if it happens that way. But I don't think I don't foresee them going down to the Eagles, 10, 14, 18, 20 points, something like that, heading into the third and fourth quarter. I just don't see that happening. So for the Eagles, keys to winning the game. Besides the obvious, and for the Eagles, I think what they need to do really are, like, you try to pick out things that wouldn't seem so obvious, but I think for the Eagles, it really is as simple as getting Tom Brady uncomfortable. We've seen the teams that are good at competing with and beating the Pats are teams that can get pressure on him, especially up the middle, because he's not going to evade you out of the pocket, right? He's not going to run. Every now and then, if he has to run for a short first down, he can, and he will. He's not afraid to, but you're not concerned with that all game long. Maybe on a key third down here or there, something like that, which obviously you don't want to happen. But by and large, you're not worried about Tom Brady running for 10, 12, 15 yards on a given play, right? You got to put pressure on him up the middle. You have to move him off of that spot. Coming off the outside, he's going to step up in the pocket. He's a seasoned vet. He's a genius. He's the GOAT. Rushing up outside and getting too deep, he's going to step right up into the pocket, slide left or right, and make the throw. You got to get pressure on him up the middle. And they have to be able to run the football effectively, because one of the keys for the Eagles has been Nick Foles and the run-pass option, play action, things of that nature. And I found this stat. Nick Foles this year has a almost 94% completion percentage on run-pass options. On run-pass options. That's insane. That's insanely high. I mean, that's a can't miss. Like, it's that simple. And so, but in order for that to be as effective as it needs to be, you have to be able to run the football. Same thing with the Pats. Like the Pats, and I said this before, the Pats run the football a lot of times for the sake of running it. You can't just abandon the run at some points of the game because it's necessary for some other play calling, some other matchups that you might want to get. Things of that nature. And the Pats, even though like Deion Lewis ran for I think less than 900 yards, but they run him with the football in key situations, even in passing situations sometimes, because they want to make the defense honor the run so that they can run the play action and loosen up the defense. And I think the Eagles need to do the same thing, even if they aren't fully effective or I guess fully dominant in running the football against the Pats. They have to continue to do so in order for that run-pass option to be effective. And to speaking to that point, Nick Foles, when not running run-pass option plays, has a completion percentage of 61%, 61.5, 8 to 2 touchdown interception ratio. Like that's good, and that's that's a third of the percentage. Like that is a significant drop. So you can see why it's important. It makes it gives Foles easy throws, and it also puts him in a rhythm. He gets to see the ball, leave his hand accurately, get completed. It builds his confidence, puts him in a rhythm so that when they want to take a shot down the field or, a deeper shot, he's comfortable, he's in a rhythm, he feels good about it. He's not just running it 40 times in a row and then trying to come up and launch it down the field with no rhythm whatsoever. The RPOs for him are really good. And you can see that in his percentage. And so that's something that the Eagles need to stick with because it is the recipe for beating the Pats. Ball control, time of possession, keep Brady on the sideline, run the football, and play solid defense. Rush Tom Brady up the middle, get him off the spot, make him have to be mobile within the pocket. And he is great at it, but you have to be able to push him backwards. You can't let him step up into the throw. And it's going to be difficult because the Pats obviously run that quick fire offense. The ball's out of his hand in a second and a half, 2 seconds a lot of the times. So it is difficult to pull off, especially as of late, the last couple of years. As I said, with them running that really quick fire offense, it's something to think about. But again, it's necessary because you can't let Brady sit back. He's seen too much film. He's played too many games. He's seen too many people come and go. For you to sit back there and let him pick you apart in the pocket it is going to be a huge mistake. And rushing from the outside, obviously you have to rush from the outside, but what I mean is rushing too deep up the field is essentially, you're running yourself out of the play. So that's something that they got to be aware of. For the Eagles, that's it for me. I don't think it's much more complicated than that for them. And for the Pats, I think offensively they'll be fine. I think they'll score points on the Eagles defense. I don't think the Eagles defense is going to shut them down. I don't think that's the way this is going to play out. But what I will say is defensively for the Pats, they cannot allow the Eagles to just run the football down their throats because it is going to be a long, long day if they do that. Nick Foles is completing almost 78% of his passes in these last two playoff games with almost 300 yards passing in both games, with 122 passer rating on 9.5 yards per attempt down the field. So he's not just dinking and dunking down the field. Obviously, and a lot of that has to do with yards at the catch. Even if you throw a 3 or 5 yard slant, if the receiver can pick up an extra couple of yards, that still, it helps with those numbers. But bottom line is, he's not been playing terribly, so they can't allow him to get into that rhythm. They're going to have to be aggressive on defense. They got to take away the running game, force Nick Foles to beat them throwing the ball down the field, not sideline to sidelines, and in that 10-yard window from line of scrimmage to first down marker. They can't allow him to do that all game because it's going to be a long day if they do. It'll be a loss for the Pats in the Super Bowl if they allow him to run the football and get those quick fire slants and screens and things of that nature off without much contest. If they can stop the running game, I think that'll be all that they really need to do. I think if they can stifle the running game, I don't think Nick Foles is going to beat them throwing the ball down the field. He made a couple of great throws last week. The one he threw to Jeffries was kind of on a broken play. Not so much a broken play. It was more like a long developing play. It just took too long for the route to come open, and by the time everything was read by Foles, it just was too late. So Jeffrey broke the route deep. He happened to be open, made the throw. Hats off to him. But I would take my chances on, and even just with the receivers themselves. The only one that would scare me going down the field is Jeffrey because of his height. He can obviously win those jump balls, and so that's something that you have to be aware of. But aside from that, I would want Nick Foles to try and beat me throwing the football down the field. That's where I think I'd be most comfortable as a defense. They have to get him out of that rhythm, though. They can't allow them to run the ball that way, and I think to do that, they need, and they will. Bill Belichick is awesome at it. He's going to have to confuse him at the line of scrimmage because the whole thing with the RPOs, right? Is the idea is to essentially decide where you're going with the football before the ball is even snapped, right? A lot of passing plays or a lot of plays in general, there are reads that happen after the ball is snapped, and that will determine where the ball is going. With the RPOs, a lot of times the decision is made before the ball is ever snapped. The quarterback gets up, reads the defense, he can run it, he can throw it, and so forth and so on. But he's normally made up his mind before the ball is snapped. And I think what the Pats need to do is confuse him at the line of scrimmage. And Bill Belichick would do that. He's obviously a great coach. They'll get that part done. The issue is, will it be successful? Will they be able to stop LeGarrette Blount and Ajayi? Those are two pretty powerful backs. So it's going to be a tough one for them. But bottom line for me, I just can't bet against the Pats, right? And I've been doing some research over the last couple of days just on the history of the Patriots and Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and things of that nature, and just admiring success. I like success. I've never been a big Pats fan. I've always liked Brady because I didn't like Peyton Manning because he was in our division. I'm a Titans fan, obviously, and he beat the mess out of us for years and years and years, and so I disliked him, and that's where I sort of gravitated towards Brady. But as I got older and got the chance to watch him more consistently and study what he was doing, like, I've become pretty fascinated with him in his life and his commitment to success. And I just don't see him failing at this level. Going for ring number 6, I think they're going to get it. And so at 40 years old, he led the league in passing, albeit with Wentz going down. I think he would have been the MVP had he not gotten injured. Brady will likely be the MVP. And what's crazy is the game against Jacksonville, was Tom Brady's 42nd fourth quarter comeback and his 53rd game-winning drive of his career. And think about that. 42 times he has been trailing in the fourth quarter and has come back to win. 53 game-winning drives. Like, that is insanely good. And some people don't know that. And it's one of those things that you kind of, as you're watching players, it kind of slips past you that some of these amazing accomplishments have happened, even in some of the less popular, like, for example, in the NBA, Carmelo Anthony just crossed the 25,000 point mark, and a lot of people look at him as a disappointment. I love Melo personally, but he's never won championship, never been to the finals, never won the conference finals, none of that stuff. But you tend to forget those accomplishments, and 25,000 points is a lot of points. Okay, if you go look at the points leaders all time, look at some of the names on that list. Like, 25,000 is a lot. And my point being, the same thing with Brady. Like, as you're watching him, you tend to forget some of these smaller statistics. And for another example, the Patriots, since Brady's been to the Super Bowl in 2001, 2003, 2004, 7, 11, 14, 16, and 17, and now back again this year in 18. And if you look at that, like, their longest drought of reaching the Super Bowl, now not winning, but their longest drought of reaching the Super Bowl was 4 years. And one of those 4 years was the ACL injury that he suffered, where they missed the playoffs with Matt Castle. They were 11-5, missed the playoffs. So even if you don't want to count that year, the longest stretch that they've gone without making it to the Super Bowl was 3 years. And that's over the last, call it 20 years. That's incredible. I'm a Titans fan. They ain't sniffed the playoffs since 2000. So almost 20 years, they haven't even gotten close. A lot of teams, the Browns haven't even gotten close. The Bengals, the Chargers, you can go on down the line of all of these teams over the last decade or 2 decades that haven't even gotten close to the Super Bowl. And the Pats are in it, it seems like every other year. It's just incredible. For me, and for my prediction, I'm going to go 31-20 to the Pats. It seems like a bigger score. But every couple of years you have one of those kind of not fluky, but almost blowout Super Bowls. The Broncos and Seahawks a couple of years ago. You had, it's hard for me to think of a couple now. But a lot of times you get these sort of one-sided Super Bowls, and I think this is going to be it. Now, I think it's going to look one-sided if you just look at the score. 31-20 seems a bit much, but I think it's going to play out a lot like the Kansas City Pats game, the season opener, where for most of the game it was a fairly even game, and in fact it looked like the Pats were dominating, and then it was just a string of bad events led to this lopsided score. And I think a lot of people got carried away with that to begin with, because it for all intents and purposes, the Chiefs could have gotten blown out that night, and they had a couple of things bounce their way, and it just got out of hand so fast that I don't think, obviously the Pats weren't able to recover. That, and the fact that the Chiefs seem to be their Achilles heel, much like they are to the Steelers, the Chiefs are to the Pats. So, looking at those two things, it makes perfect sense to me anyway. And I think we're going to see something like that again in this Super Bowl, where I think for the first half especially, and maybe a lot of the third quarter, you're going to see a fairly close, even game. The Eagles may even win most of it, even in score-wise, something like 17-10 or 13-14, something like that. And then I think you're going to see the experience of Brady and Belichick and the rest of those guys, the discipline, the commitment to excellence, the hard work. And that's not to say that the Eagles haven't worked hard, obviously, because they have. But I'm talking about this long, sustained success that the Pats have had for over the last 20 years. I think you're going to see that come out, especially in the second half and fourth quarter. And that's what you've seen over the last couple of games, the last Super Bowl. I think it was as much experience and discipline that beat the Jags as it was, play calling and coaching and things of that nature. I don't know. it just doesn't feel right to me. And it could come completely down to coaching. Obviously, Doug Peterson, nowhere near the experience in coaching in general that Bill Belichick has, much less in the playoffs and Super Bowl. And you have a quarterback who's not been there, who's been a backup, so there's definitely a lack of experience there. And you can say what you want, but experience matters. It does. Being able to rely on what you know versus reacting in a situation like this in a big game is very, very helpful. And when you haven't been there, you don't have that instinct. So you have to rely on what you've been taught, what you've been coached, what you saw on film, instead of sometimes not having to think about what it is, instead of just letting your mind and body react to what you've been taught over the last, for Brady's sake, 20 years. And I think you're going to see that play out for the Eagles. I just don't think they have enough experience on the roster, they got enough talent by all means. But I think you'll see that in the first half, much like last year. I think you're going to see the Eagles come out firing to begin with. And like I said, the Pats definitely cannot afford to fall behind early. I think this is the one team that you can't do that against. But if that doesn't happen, if they're not up by, call it 14 or 20 by halftime, to me, I think they lose that game. Even if they go into halftime up 10, up 13, even up 14, or maybe 20 might be a bit of a stretch. But if they go into the halftime less than 14 points up on the Pats, I think you can wrap it up. So my score 31-20. Brady gets his 6, which I don't think will ever be repeated again. Chris Carter on First Things First thinks he'll get 7. It's not far-fetched to me. And I'm fascinated by the Pats. I'm fascinated by Tom Brady. I'm in the success, in the amount of work and effort and commitment it takes to get to where they are. I'm astonished by it, and I love watching it. I don't like the Pats. I'm not a Pats fan. I'm not a Brady fan, but I am a fan of hard work. I am a fan of people's level of commitment to whatever their craft is, and Brady and the Pats have that, and they have it year in and year out. They have discipline. People like to call them cheaters, and the refs do this for them. And listen, the Pats, you can watch the film. The Pats are the most disciplined sports team, maybe outside of like a Alabama or something like that I've seen ever. And obviously I haven't seen I'm not that old, but for what I've seen, I don't know how you can get any better as an organization, as a sports franchise, than the Pats have been over the last few years. It's pretty crazy to watch. It's pretty astonishing to watch. And if you can set aside, and it's hard for me as well. I mean, they beat my team in the playoffs, albeit I didn't think they really had a chance to begin with, but still, I'm a fan. I want my team to win. And it's difficult as a fan sometimes to watch them because they are so good, and it kind of makes you envious and jealous because you're like, why is it that a lot of other teams and my team can't adopt that to some degree, at least, and get better? And there's a number of reasons why it couldn't happen. Coaching is different. The players' mentality is different. Your leader has to be on board with the coach. The coach has to be on board with the leader in Tom Brady. Coordinators have to be in sync. Like, all of these things have to happen. And it's astonishing that they have that from top to bottom, from Kraft all the way down to the kicker, as far as everyone's commitment to the end goal, which is winning championships. And I think they're going to win another one. I don't think it's going to be as entertaining as some of the previous ones. Definitely not as last year. I mean, last year is going to be hard to top. But even sitting aside last year, looking at the Panthers Broncos Super Bowl, looking at the Eagles or the Seahawks Pats last Super Bowl, those were some phenomenal games to watch. And I don't think we're going to get that for this game. I think it'll be a good game. I just don't think it's going to have that feeling to it. And I think, like I said, I think the Pats are going to, by and large, show why they are back in the Super Bowl. A lot of people doubted them. No talent. They lost Edelman. They lost Hightower. Gronk's been injured. Linemen are in and out of the lineup and injury report. And, I mean, you can go on down the list, and they still are in the Super Bowl and are probably going to win. In fact, I think they are going to win. Like I said, 31-20 Pats. That's all I got. I just said a lot, but whatever. take it and run with it. It's been your boy. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.